listening to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Hey, everybody. I think today I'm going to live up to that motto because I'm going to have my opinion. And I don't know if it's going to be a popular one or not, but that's all right. That's why I get the big money, right? How you doing, Josh?
Doing pretty well.
Do you have any problems getting the studio?
No. Roads are a lot better today.
I got up early to go to my DBU class, and most of the roads are pretty good, but there's still idiots out there that are driving like there's no problem at all. I mean, I'm on 20, and there's guys still zooming in and out. And like, bro, pay attention. Anyway, everything is just wonderful over at DBU, as always. Of course, have you ever been on that campus?
I think I toured it a long time ago.
Well, it's up on the hills, right? And so, it was very slow driving through the campus today. But anyway, back to the matter at hand, back to the important things. I'm going to talk about the situation in Minneapolis because that really has been weighing on my heart and mind quite a bit. It's certainly been in the news a lot. So that's part of it. Before I get too far ahead, I want to go ahead and make sure that everybody gets access to this. Oh, doggone it. Say it right. Do it right. Anyway, we're going to do it here. Boom, boom, boom. Anyway, I'll do it during the news clip we're going to have. Anyway, we're going to talk about the Minneapolis thing because a lot of people I know are really disturbed by this. And the opinions fluctuate about the whole thing, but nobody should be happy with what they're seeing in Minneapolis. And yesterday we talked with Shandy Pretty up in Portland, Maine, and talked about what's going on there. What's interesting, just for immediate update, I was looking at the news about an hour ago, and in the Washington Post page, they say that those operations in Maine have been suspended. And Susan Collins gets to announce it because she probably wants to get the credit or whatever else for doing it. But they suspended it. And the second article was a lot of the MAGA people are very upset with Mr. Trump. And I find that interesting. I really do. They're thinking that Donald Trump on this particular issue is starting to waver a bit or whatever else. I don't know. I only had time to briefly look at the article, so I don't know all the content of it, but I do know that according to the Post, the main operations that Shandy and I talked about yesterday in such detail have been curtailed greatly. And also, they're making announcements today about Minneapolis also having less of a presence there with ICE and other agents. Now, this is all within the last hour, so I'll see you on Monday. Now, we're going to talk about what's going on. So I'll talk about the sponsors. I always have the usual caveat. These are my opinions, not necessarily theirs, but I appreciate the opportunity to bring it out to the air, and you're certainly welcome to respond one way or the other. Our friends over at our place. I had to miss breakfast this morning because of my class. We get together. I'm sure my friends discussed what's going on in Minneapolis. And it's interesting because I talked to a lot of these men. A lot of these men are in my Sunday school class and others. And they all kind of fall in the same category as they want border enforcement, but they don't want this, right? They're very disturbed at what they see. And so it's just interesting. Anyway, second of all, Gina's Pizza is open for lunch now. In fact, after this is over, I'm meeting somebody over there for lunch, going to get one of their hot dogs. You ever been over there for a hot dog?
I haven't, no.
No, it's good.
I need to.
You like hot dogs?
I do.
I do too. My wife loves them. We grill out hot dogs fairly often because she just really likes them. But anyway, they have a really good Chicago dog, and they got other various types, but whatever else. But Gina's is really, really good. And I'm really glad that they're around because you go there. They got the ball game on. If there is one, they have the music going. It's just wonderful. Also, a friend John at Old Pro Roofing, John Williams, 817-734-2756. This is a busy time, no doubt, with all this weather we've had. And it's a bad time to find out that your roof wasn't able to handle the ice storm or whatever else. What'll happen is when the ice starts to melt, it finds those cracks in the roof that get to the ceiling and cause you all sorts of problems. So John can help you find those problems before they start even. Give them a call over at Old Pro Roofing. They're here in town. I don't know if you've gotten a lot of people knocking on your door about your roof lately, but it's very likely you're going to soon. And you need to have somebody in town, somebody you can find when you need them. That's Opro Roofing. Also, my friend Jeff Kelly at the Weatherington Agency, 817-781-0546. It's always good weather to go house hunting with Jeff. If you're looking to move in and around Johnson County, you can do it. He's doing a lot of business in Joshua and Godley, he says. Burleson's still pretty steady, but the growth area in Johnson County so far lately has been Godley. This is before your time, certainly, but Godley was nothing to go to except for that Del Norte taco. You ever been there?
Yes, actually, I have.
It's really great, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's that was the only reason to go. But now they're having tremendous growth over there. So there you go. Okay, let's talk about what's going on in the world. I have a news clip. This is about 3 or 4 days old, but it's still pertinent because really I've been watching the news, and they're just variations of the same story, more or less. There's been some added stuff. In fact, I had a clip that apparently YouTube dropped, so would have had a little bit more than just this one. But what can you do, right? So, Josh, we'll let this one roll, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
See Nightly News with Jose Diaz-Balart.
Good evening. We will get to that massive winter storm in just a moment, but we begin with a tragic and disturbing deadly shooting involving federal officers in Minneapolis, the second in just 3 weeks. This video shows the chaotic scene when officers surrounded a man who the Department of Homeland Security says was armed, took him down, shot and killed him. Following that, protesters clashed with federal officers who used tear gas and smoke bombs to control the crowd. Camila Bernal starts us off, and a warning, some of the video you're about to see is disturbing.
Chaos on the streets of Minneapolis today. This video showing a confrontation with federal agents escalating into a new deadly shooting, reigniting tensions in a city already on edge. The video capturing multiple gunshots being fired. This video showing the moment from another angle.
Oh, what the They killed him? Did they kill that guy? Are you kidding me, dude?
Pushing in on the video lets you see the man being taken to the ground, agents surrounding him and striking blows, until this moment, when the first shot is fired, immediately followed by several more. The Department of Homeland Security saying the man who was shot approached Border Patrol officers armed with this semi-automatic handgun and violently resisted attempts to disarm him. The agents, according to DHS, were conducting a targeted operation.
Call an ambulance, please. Call an ambulance.
DHS says despite the efforts of medics, the suspect was pronounced dead at the scene. The man now identified by the Associated Press as 37-year-old Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse.
The only interaction that we are aware of with law enforcement has been for traffic tickets.
Local police saying Preddy was a lawful gun owner and that details of what led to the shooting remain unclear. It was a tense sight today in the southern part of Minneapolis as protesters calling for ICE to leave built a makeshift barricade in the streets using dumpsters and furniture. Authorities launching flashbangs and tear gas trying to rein in the crowds. Reporters attempting to get close to the scene repeatedly forced to retreat.
I haven't seen any tear gas deployment, but
by the afternoon, video from overhead showing a city looking like an urban battlefield. People who were there today trying to make sense of it all.
What is the end goal here? Who does this benefit? Who does this make safe? Because it's not us. It's not anyone living here.
Today's incident comes 2.5 weeks after the fatal shooting of Renee Good. Last night, an FBI agent resigning over the investigation into that shooting after it focused more on the actions of Good and her partner than on the officer who shot Good, according to 2 people familiar with the decision. The FBI also on the scene today of another fatal shooting. Leaders in the city today continuing their call for federal agents to leave.
So to everyone listening, stand with Minneapolis. Stand up for America.
Camila Bernal joins me now from Minneapolis, where there is already a memorial growing for the man killed today.
Let's go ahead and
Camila,
cut it here, because I want to save time for the other one. But why don't you just jump to the second one? It's a bit shorter. It also has the government's response to what we just saw.
President Trump tonight slamming Minnesota's governor and the mayor of Minneapolis, accusing them of inciting insurrection with their rhetoric, while writing, "Let our ICE patriots do their job." Attorney General Pam Bondi not ruling out that the president could invoke the Insurrection Act.
I'm never going to get ahead of the president. This is a very fluid situation right now.
It's a rarely used 19th century law, giving the president power to deploy active duty troops in the U.S. for law enforcement purposes, and a threat the president appeared to recently back down from.
I don't think there's any reason right now to use it, but if I needed it, I'd use it. It's very powerful.
The Attorney General says federal agencies like the FBI, DEA, and ATF are heading to Minneapolis to back up Homeland Security operations on the ground, with DHS Secretary Kristi Noem blaming local leaders.
Governor Walz and Mayor Frey, they instead choose violence. They instead choose to encourage the destruction of their city and the crime against their people. I'm asking for all the authorities in Minneapolis and the leaders to work with us.
White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller claimed, without providing evidence, that the man who was killed was a domestic terrorist, a label he also used for Renee Good, who was shot and killed by an ICE officer earlier this month. In the wake of that shooting, a New York Times Siena poll out this week finding 63% disapprove of ICE's job performance, with 61% saying ICE tactics have gone too far.
Monica joins me now from the White House. And Monica, the shooting may be putting government funding in question?
Yes, a sweeping package passed the House recently, but now it needs to go to the Senate, where several key Democrats have signaled they'll vote against DHS funding unless restrictions are put on immigration enforcement operations. Jose?
We thank you for watching.
Right, it's good. It's good. Thank you. I don't even know where to begin, to tell you the truth. I mean, one of the values of learning and studying and teaching history is you could put things in a context, and we've been through these things before. And we've seen people react in similar ways to other types of protests, to civil rights and to Vietnam, which are most common in our history, but also other movements as well. Many movements that people now would consider to be pretty normal parts of their lives, like labor movements or the abolition movement or things of that nature. And there's always that side of it, that justified force against those protesters because they didn't follow the law or they weren't obeying the police or anything else. Renee Good and Alex Preddy are not domestic terrorists, and they did not deserve to be shot, and they weren't asking for it. All right, they were engaged in protest, and people said, well, you should have done what the police said. You know what should have done with Renee Good? If she was violating the law, and even if she drove away and it clipped one of the ICE agents, which they say they dramatized his injuries, which basically there were none, but it was still an act. She drove, he got clipped a bit, and then he killed her. And people call that justified. What they should have done is let her drive off, take her license plate down. They probably already had her ID information. Let the Minneapolis police go pick her up later, and they could have prosecuted her for, dangerous activities towards a law officer or something like that. And I found it appalling that people said, well, she should have just done what the cop said or she'd still be alive. And that's not how it works.
Can I point something out?
Please do.
If I were in my car and an unidentified masked man with a gun were walking up to my car, the first thing I would do is drive off.
Right. Even if you knew it was a law enforcement officer, I still think that she didn't deserve to be killed. And there's no getting around that fact. But if a guy comes up to your car in a mask and a gun and he says, I'm with the law, but he doesn't have identification, okay, I'm going to be suspicious as well. But, I'll grant that probably Renee Good knew that these were ICE agents. But the fact is, what they could have done It just, okay, drive off when she's about to leave, get out of the way, take her license plate down if they didn't have it already, or if they were just dead determined not to let her get away, shoot out the tires or something along those lines. They did not need to put 2 bullets in her head, which is exactly what happened. And then you get that creature of the dark, Stephen Miller. If you don't know who he is Trump's deputy chief of staff, and head of, basically running this whole operation, to tell you the truth. Calling her a domestic terrorist. For what? For showing up at a protest. And because it was a protest that, may be supporting something that's unpopular with some people, they say she deserves to be killed. I think it's appalling that one of our Texas Senate candidates, Wesley Hunt, said, in effect, I'll try to quote as closely as I can, said, the rule is you do what the police says and you get to keep your life. That phrase is right. You get to keep your life. That's not how it is. If we obey the police, we get to live. You're shaking your head over there, aren't you?
Don't get me started.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Why not? You just think it's a terrible thing to say, right?
Yeah.
It is. Because, that kind of attitude, do what the police says or you get killed, that's dictatorship. That's what you see in totalitarian states. You don't do what the Chinese police say in China, you get killed. That's what happens. That's not what happens in the United States. And then we go to Alex Preddy, okay? And this is what really galls me, is the Second Amendment arguments that are going back and forth, and they completely flip sides. You got liberal types saying he had a right to wear that gun, where in any other occasion they're anti-gun, right? Whereas the pro-Second Amendment people said he shouldn't have a gun. He shouldn't have had a gun there. He didn't have a right to bring it there. No, even the NRA said, yes, he does, Mr. President. They actually contradicted Mr. Trump on that one. And his FBI chief, Kash Patel, said he shouldn't have brought a gun. Should he have brought a gun? Probably not. Was it his right to bring a gun? Yes. The whole Second Amendment, and I'm in favor of the Second Amendment, all right? The whole Second Amendment is not so we can have hunting rifles. It's to protect ourselves from dictatorial governments, okay? That's the whole point of it. And when the government tries to take away guns like they did, it was well after the Civil War. I mean, towards the early 20th century, before a black man could own a weapon legally in the South. Why? Because they didn't want him to go hunting? That's ridiculous. It's because they want to keep him disarmed in case they had wanted to deal with him. It's the same thing now. Should he have brought a gun? No, that wasn't really that smart. But if we get killed every time we don't do something smart, there wouldn't be very many of us left around. I know that much. He shouldn't have brought a gun. And I'm appalled. I was appalled at some of the people on my Facebook feed that were taking that stance. Well, he basically was asking for it by bringing that gun. No, he wasn't. And he didn't draw the gun on anybody. They said, the Miss Nome tried to make it sound like he was waving the gun around and threatening officers. And so is Fox News. I mean, they still are trying to show that in some way Mr. Preddy antagonized the officers. What he was doing was taping on his phone. They didn't like that. When they come to take his phone, that's when the tussle starts, and they disarmed him, and then he kept on fighting. So they shot him 10 times and left him lying in the street dead.
There's also the fact that in the full video, he gets in between ICE agents and I think a female protester
right.
They were harassing.
They were harassing another protester. He gets in the way, and he has it all on tape, which they don't, or phone. I still call it tape, but it's all recorded.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and they didn't like that, and they try to take his phone from him, and that's when the wrestling match starts. It wasn't, the gun had nothing to do with it. And so they point out, the Trump administration says, hey, he had this gun. So what? It's his right to have it. He wasn't threatening anybody with it. It never left his holster. And if you think I am making a big deal out of that, so is the National Review, and so is the Wall Street Journal, and so are most other conservative Second Amendment supporters saying it may not have been smart, but it was his right, and he didn't threaten anybody with it. And they treated him as a threat, a domestic terrorist, and shot him 10 times. 10 times? Really? Once is too many. But I just find it astounding that people still support that. It's like Trump and his position is all that really matters. It doesn't matter anything else. Any previously held position you held on anything is gone by the boards for a lot of people, too many people. And I get this all the time. I get crap about, I've left the conservative movement. I'll tell you right now, I'm more conservative than most of these Trumpers. What Trump does is not conservative. Conservatives believe in due process of law. And basically we got Trump saying, I am the law. And that's not a paraphrase. He said it to New York Times reporters that he bases his decisions on his own morality and his own mind. And I had people supporting that. Had Joe Biden or Obama said that, they'd have gone crazy. If Trump said it, they should have gone crazy because that's why we have a Constitution. The Founding Fathers wrote that Constitution to prevent one man making all these decisions based on his own morality or his own thinking. They intentionally set up a system where conflict would produce consensus. They intentionally set up a system where conflict was going to prevent one wave of thinking dominating the whole process. People look at the Constitution and said, it's too many conflicts in it. The conflict is a feature, not a bug. The Founding Fathers did that to prevent exactly what Donald Trump is doing. Is basing the law on how he feels that particular moment. And people that support that, I don't know what to say to them anymore because they would never have accepted this at all. And so, I get worked up a little bit because I get accused of betraying and I'm no longer a Republican. Well, the thing about it is Donald Trump's not a Republican. He has an R after his name, but again, it's whatever he says the Republican Party is that day. And you get the people in Congress that'll just baa like sheep and go along with it. What I would encourage, this is kind of a side note, but I encourage my friends that still support Donald Trump to remember what this country stood for, and it was not for arbitrary use of power, both in this instance or with the tariffs or dealing with our foreign allies, and all this crap about Greenland and all this other stuff. That's not Republican, and that's not conservative. Trashing NATO, that's not Republican. Making threats on other countries' property, that's not Republican. It's not conservative, certainly. But I'm going to get back to Minneapolis here. The thing about Minneapolis that bothers me the most is that you get people say, well, then you must be in favor of open borders. That's a lazy way of thinking. That's a way of getting out of the argument. That's a way for people who make that argument, it's like an excuse not to think because they don't have to deal with the issues involved. Well, you must be in favor of open borders. You must be in favor of keeping criminals and rapists and crooks in this country. No, I'm not. And most Democrats I know are not in favor of that either. In fact, if I were to name anybody, at least go through the roster in my head of people I know to be Democrats, I can't think of one that would support the idea of allowing illegal aliens here that have criminal records. And when Tom Homan, the borders was starting this, he said, we're going to go after the worst of the worst. Now they're just sweeping them all up, regardless. And the percentage, I went over it yesterday, I believe, but only about 23% now have any kind of criminal encounter, you might say, and only 5% of those would be considered felony level crimes. So the vast majority of the people they've been picking up in the last 3 or 4 months have no criminal history whatsoever. Now you say, well, just by being here, they are a criminal. It's not necessarily true. And Sandy and I talked about this. Now, to be frank, when Biden was president and I saw people rushing the border and we had all those hundreds of thousands of people monthly coming into our country, yeah, I was very, very concerned for various reasons. One is I knew that amongst all those people were not just desperate families, but they were criminals and terrorists coming through and cartel members and gang members. Yeah, absolutely. I was very concerned about that, and it's proven to be true that some of in that bum rush to the border, a lot of bad people got through. A lot of traffickers got through, trafficking women for prostitution, bringing drugs, etc. But that is, the thing about it is most of the people that I know of, left or right, are very much in favor of getting rid of those people. Okay? No one is saying they need to stay here just because. What's happening, though, is a lot of people came here and Biden loosened the asylum rules and people started claiming asylum, and people think that it's an automatic ticket into the country. I told Shandy yesterday only about 38%, 1 in 3 roughly, actually receive asylum. How many people have skipped their asylum hearings? I can't find information on that from a credible source. So, you got something over there? Yeah, just getting your coffee, okay, or your whiskey, whatever.
A little bit of both.
Yeah, okay. But so I'm not going to give you a bunch of stats that I am not sure of the quality of the source. The last hard numbers I had are about 4 years ago, and that's well before all this. But the point is, nobody is not in favor of getting rid of these people. And yes, Biden deserves a great deal of criticism. He's going to be, in my opinion, he'll go down as one of the least effective presidents in our history. And this is a big reason why, because he basically just opened the borders. And yes, a lot of those were desperate people from Guatemala or Honduras or Africa or wherever you want to say, and they got in because they're trying to escape things from their homeland. And yes, there were some people that are dangerous to this country that need to be removed. I don't have a problem with ICE doing that. What I have a problem is what they're doing in Minnesota. Basically, what they did in Portland, Maine, until about 2 hours ago, I guess, is they're going through and sweeping through the city and just taking people willy-nilly. And you have people that are here legally for various reasons, may not be citizens, but they're here through legal processes that were set up at the time that are getting swept up in this. Like Shandy was talking about that gentleman from the Congo. He was awaiting his asylum hearing. He was about a year away from it. He followed the rules at that time. Now, you may hate those rules that Joe Biden set up, but that's the law. And when Trump goes back and says, well, we don't care, we're going to go back and retroactively deport all these people that came through this process, I don't even know that's constitutional, because there is a constitutional line. I mean, word for word said the ex post facto laws will not be permitted. An ex post facto law is a law that's passed at one point and then they retroactively enforce it and penalize the people who violated it. It'd be like, Crowley changing the speed limits from 40 to 30, and then he walk in and give me a ticket because last week I was doing 40. Does it make sense? You're shaking your head. All right. Well, I'm just saying, go ahead, get some. You got some.
You keep going.
Okay. Anyway, the point is that you can't, again, you don't like what Biden did. Fine. I didn't like what Biden did. And I thought the asylum rules were being abused, because what happened was, in many cases, we've had asylum laws for a long, long time. And, but basically they were under certain set of circumstances and certain categories of people. And then Biden basically obliterated all that. All right. And I was having a conversation, Facebook conversation, if you will, with somebody, an attorney that deals with this. And she was telling me that what we had under Biden was more in line with international and humanitarian laws. Well, okay, that doesn't mean I like it. I'm sorry. I think that we let the asylum thing get out of hand. But now for us to go through and say, sorry, it's incredibly disruptive. And I think what the hypocrisy about the whole illegal immigration issue, I've said before and I'll say it again, I think it's very hypocritical for someone who would be so adamant about illegals, getting rid of all the illegals. I think if they actually could wave a magic wand and that happened, they would realize that, they don't realize the economic damage that would do to this country. It would really cause a backlash on our economy, because they provide a lot of the labor that all the other people won't do, no matter what the wage. Okay, I'll never want to be able to clean toilets or be a janitor. I don't care if they're paying me $30 an hour, maybe $35. I don't know. I'm just saying, it would take a lot of money for some people to do these jobs. And then we got people crashing the border that were willing to do it for, $10 an hour or less. People that, they're hypocritical about it because they think that the illegal immigration population is a drain on society. Well, if you focus on, the kids are in the schools and and you have the ERs that are overloaded and all this. Okay, fine. But look at the other side. Look at the other side of the equation. And how much they benefit by the fact that they do a lot of jobs that American people won't do. Yeah, and they do it for, much less wages than anybody would be willing to do it. It's like I don't want these people here except for the guy that mows my lawn. I made that point before. Eric Mote says, did you see the abandoned construction sites in Florida where they have threatened illegal immigration there? Well, I haven't seen them in Florida, but I've seen them in other places. Is that you are having a problem with getting people in the construction industries. There's just not enough native-born Americans that are doing this job. You go to any construction site, there's going to be a very heavy Hispanic presence there, and some of them may not be here legally. Same with just about any construction-related activity. And same thing with agriculture. The farmers down in South Texas were appealing to Mr. Trump to allow their workers to stay. They were starting to go through in California, speaking of agriculture, they started going through some of the workers there and collecting all of these people, regardless of whatever record they had or didn't have. And the farmers in California said, Mr. Trump, please don't do that. And Mr. Trump, by the wave of his hand, said they can stay. This goes back to what I was talking about before, about Mr. Trump. Basically, whatever is on his mind is what is the government's policy, regardless of any constitutional issues. So those guys can stay because they appeal to Mr. Trump personally. But yeah, you take out all the undocumented worker and all this other stuff, you're going to have a real problem in restaurant industries, the construction industries, agricultural industries, the meat packing plants. All right. They've gone through some of those meat packing plants and taken out those undocumented workers there. Again, most of them did not have a criminal record of any kind, but they took them out, deported them. All right. And so there's all, am I saying they need to stay? What I'm saying to you is that there is a due process that needs to be followed. And there's got to be a way that we can maintain labor in this country without giving up our borders. In 2006, Mr. Bush tried that and was shot down primarily by Democrats because the labor union support was afraid of what they do to wages. Obama floated that out there and then retracted it very quickly when he got some blowback because, there you go. He just didn't want to mess with it. Neither side has ever wanted to really deal with this issue. And the thing about it is, am I saying we need to make them all citizens right now? No, but there needs to be we need to have a due process. The thing about it, on a side note, Mr. Reagan did this in 1986, and people still think I'm lying about it, even though I saw the lines myself. But, can you imagine? Mr. Reagan's not conservative enough for some of these people. And Trump has made comments that are very uncomplimentary about Mr. Reagan, and, it shows what you got there. But anyway, the point is that there has to be a way that we can keep the labor without having to destroy families. And it seems like a lot of people that make these kind of arguments about getting rid of all the immigrants have very, very little contact with them. I can remember a story about 6-7 years ago, before I knew John. I had my roof done. I don't want to. Another roofer here in town. We've got some decent roofers, but this is before I knew Old Pro and John. And it was about 7 years ago. They were putting a roof on a house, and the wife of one of the workers came, and I asked her, what does she work for him or whatever? And she didn't speak much English at all. I know very little Spanish. My son's girlfriend, who's now fiance, knew some Spanish. And so we got to communicate what's going on. And she told us they're from El Salvador. That's it. And it was you know, how terrible it was, the gangs and everything else. And so, but why she was there is because she and her husband were undocumented, and they didn't want to be separate in case they got picked up. Well, it never occurred to me to go notify law enforcement authorities that there was an illegal immigrant working on my roof, among with all these other gentlemen that were working on the roof. It never even occurred to me that. And even if it had, I wouldn't have done it. Does that make me a lawbreaker? What do you think? Come on, you got to comment.
No, it makes you a good human.
Okay. But I wouldn't even think about it. And we ended up, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but my daughter-in-law, I guess you want to call her, my son's fiance now, she and I took her to Aldi and we bought her some groceries. Because, she had a couple of kids. And people that think that woman and her husband and her kids are drains on our society don't understand economics like they think they do. Because they look at the expense of healthcare or education or whatever else, but what they don't look at is how much more money that they put into the economy. They, when they talk about, well, they don't pay taxes. Well, yeah, they do. They don't pay income tax, but neither does a large number of American citizens legally. I'm not talking about they're cheating on their taxes. I mean, they don't make enough money after the deductions to have to pay taxes. Eric Moat says, you're right. There needs to be a more streamlined due process. It took my UK friend, originally from Bristol, 8 years to gain citizenship the right way, which is just way too long for a person to be left in limbo. That is true. I mean, to become a citizen is a very arduous deal. It takes a long, long time, and we don't need to make it that tough. I think the real reason why so many people are so adamant that we get rid of all illegal immigrants, I'm not going to make this a broad statement for everybody, but within the people that are want to get rid of them, there is an element of racism there. I'm not going to say that's the only motivation for everyone that wants to get them, but I will say that's for some of them that is a motivation. A lot of it is they're afraid that if they become citizens, they'll vote Democrat, which may or may not be true. I mean, there's really not much evidence. You look here in Texas, the majority of people that with an Hispanic last name, let's say, voted Republican, particularly down south. So the point is that that's not necessarily a truism. And if they do lean more Democrat, then maybe Republicans need to adjust. Josh, you may not know this, but when I was a kid, the Republicans were the liberal party. All right.
I cannot imagine that.
In the South, there were very few Republicans anyway, but they were the liberal party. They were seen as a party of Northeastern liberals, And, you look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, only 8 Southern Democrats voted for it in the Congress. And so, things change. The reason why our two parties last that long is they adjust. The Democrats used to be very much opposed to civil rights. They're the party of segregation. Anyway, I'm getting too dug up in history, but I'm going to go into history this way. Just about every protest movement was seen at that time as a conflict between good guys and bad guys. Okay? The Vietnam protests, you had people that were adamant that the people protesting the war were un-American, and they were impeding the war effort and things of that nature, whereas the Vietnam people or anti-war people saw that what this war was doing, and they were opposed to how it was being done and things of that nature. Yet we look back on it now and we think, after we've gotten all the evidence about how Vietnam really was conducted, there's a real point there. And there are people that were killed over that. If Kent State is the first thing that comes to mind. Civil rights movement, very unpopular in certain areas of the country. They weren't obeying the law. On a side note, a couple of days ago was the anniversary of the letter from the Birmingham jail by Martin Luther King, which I had my classes read in history. And he said basically that this is how change is effected, is the people standing up and not basically obeying the law as written, but obeying their conscience. And they need to be prepared to go to jail for it. He basically was saying, I'm in jail and I chose it because I knew this would be the consequence. But it's for the right purpose. These people that are protesting in Minneapolis are American citizens. They may not be taking positions some of y'all like. That's immaterial. They're American citizens, and they're doing the most First Amendment thing we do, which is protest against what they see as an unjust government action. This idea, if you follow the law, you should be left alone, is rubbish, because sometimes the law is not the right way to do things. Okay? I'm not advocating, anarchy. I'm not advocating don't follow the law. I'm not advocating to do 80 miles an hour on the streets, all this other stuff. But I'm just saying this idea that had Renee Good followed the law, she'd be alive now. That's just not true. If Alex Pretty had just followed the law, he'd be alive now. That's just not true. It's not. It shouldn't be true. That the only way to maintain your life is to obey the police in all operations. All right? Ooh. It's fascinating, Eric says, how we look back on these historical instances of protesting with one key difference today, transparency. The Alex Pretty story would have been very different 25 years ago, I feel. It only strengthens my belief in the Constitution, especially the First Amendment. Well, that's a good way of looking at it. We look now on like the civil rights activities, and they took a very unpopular stance, and yet we look back on them now as heroes. We look back on the abolitionists, which their activities were specifically barred in many states. And yeah, I still think John Brown's a kook and a fanatic, but many of the other abolitionists are were brave people. And they certainly were advocating something that was unpopular both North and South. Okay? We look at any mass movement. There's going to be, in some people's mind, a good guy story versus a bad guy. It's good guy versus bad guy. And in this particular case, I just have to say in my heart, people that justify what happened to Alex Pretty and to Renee Good frighten me a little bit, in a sense, because what they're willing to let happen to maintain their devotion to one man, what they are willing to excuse and overlook, because of what they see as Mr. Trump's belief that day as being the imperative that drives everything. We don't have to settle for open borders at all. We can. I like strong, well-regulated borders. I like a process that people come to this country and become citizens. I don't like what I saw under the Biden administration. We had thousands of people rushing the border and sleeping in the streets in El Paso or San Antonio or other major cities. That's not the way it's supposed to have been conducted. And the damage that Mr. Biden's policy did to this country is going to be long, long in trying to resolve. But that's in the past. We got to deal with what's going on today. We need to follow the Constitution. We need to follow due process of law. And if people think that immigrants don't have due process rights, the courts have ruled this for over a century that they do. Okay? I mean, they were ruling on this back prior to World War I. So they do have, they do have the rights. They don't have all the rights of an American citizen. I mean, you could be deported for violating the law, which American citizens can. They shouldn't. They don't have the right, the Bill of Rights as applied, but they do have due process under the law, according to the Constitution and according to the courts. And that's been upheld by Republican and Democrat administrations until now. And so I'm going to sum this up best I can. I reject the argument that I'm in favor, or people that feel like I do, that I'm in favor of allowing crooks, criminals, and open borders to stay. I reject it wholesale, and so do most people I know. But I also object to basically masked people with very little training, with very little compunction against using violence, doing what they're doing in some of them are cities in this country. They've been on a big hiring jag at ICE, and they're paying big bonuses to do it. So they're hiring as many people as they can lay their hands on. Some of those people don't belong behind a gun and a badge, period. They're hiring Deputy Dog or whatever out there, and he thinks he's going to be a badass and Rambo and all this other stuff. And they give him a gun, they give him SWAT equipment, they give him commando gear, they put a mask on him so he feels invulnerable, and then goes and basically feels like he can do nothing, he can't be touched. And the law didn't apply to him. I wholesale reject what's going on when our government basically in commando gear and masks go in and try to enforce the law with no restrictions, no restraints, no due process. And that's what's happening in some of our cities. If that, if that makes me a flaming liberal, well, first of all, you're mistaken. It makes me a patriot. When you say, Mr. Josh, yeah,
say what?
You weren't listening. I was.
I was. I definitely.
No, I'm just saying. No, the people. I said it didn't make me a liberal, flaming liberal. Makes me a patriot.
No, I agree.
That expect my government to abide by the laws set and treat people with due process.
Yeah, and keep its own citizens safe.
Yeah,
right.
Because if Alex Preddy can be shot for basically 10 times for standing up against what he saw was some sort of totalitarian push here, then it won't end there. And I think it's going to come closer to home sooner or later.
Oh, no. And there's this concept of privilege that's going around.
Yeah, what's that?
I hear people be like, oh, well, I'm safe. I'm, middle class, white. Mm-hmm. I follow the law and all that stuff. But I mean, let's take a look at the last 3 weeks. Your economic standing and skin color are starting to matter less and less.
Well, that, and the fact is that this may not directly apply to me now in a sense because, I'm not an illegal immigrant, right, ever. But these kind of attitudes and tactics may be applied in some other area of my life that is applicable to me.
Yeah.
My rights for speech and religion, for example.
To carry a gun. To
carry a gun, yes. All those things could be, I'm not an illegal immigrant, so, it's not like, though, therefore, what do I care? Because if this kind of tactic and this kind of approach to law enforcement is going to be applied there, it could be applied everywhere else that Mr. Trump and his crew decide. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And sooner or later, they are going to impact some area of my life that is very, very pertinent to me. So, yeah, if you don't stand up for this, even if, you say it doesn't really affect me that much, who's going to stand up for you when it's your turn to be impacted? Okay? I don't know if you ever read that poem in school about first they came for so-and-so, and then at the end, that poem says, then they came for me and no one is left to stand with me. But no, that's not a bad idea. I mean, that's not or a poor poem or anything like that. It very much means that when you see these things happening in other areas of life, sooner or later it's going to come around to you, and maybe in a different context, maybe in a different type of situation. But that kind of approach in law enforcement and in the disposability of the constitutional due process is going to come to you. I hope people heard this. The people, I feel like I'm talking to the choir in some ways, but the people I hope that see this, whenever push it forward, they will send it to other people, whatever else. I wasn't as eloquent as I'd like to be because, I refrain from broad statements about these people or all this or all that. But I'm just saying they need to reconsider their patriotism and, if it applies, their understanding of Scripture. And that's all I have to say about that. So, Monday we're going to go back to more normal broadcasting. I have Chamber on. They have a big event coming up in about 3 weeks. We're going to talk about that. And then the next day, Tuesday, there's a play. Stormy Barrett has been on this a couple times, dealing with The Promise, and she's involved with another play, The Story of Esther, which is another great story of defying law. You studied the book of Esther before? I mean, it's not a book that comes up to mind a lot, but
yeah, no, I have.
Okay, and there's some parallels, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's interesting. I thank you all for your indulgence. I hope you find this to be somewhat helpful. And we will see you all Monday at 11 o'clock with Melissa and Candace, and we'll be talking about more pleasant things, I'm sure. I'll see you then.